Frank Shamrock is a retired Mexican-American mixed martial arts fighter. Shamrock was the first to hold the UFC Middleweight Championship and retired as the four-time defending undefeated champion. Shamrock was the #1 ranked pound-for-pound UFC fighter in the world during his reign as the UFC Middleweight Champion. Shamrock has won numerous titles in other martial arts organizations, including the interim King of Pancrase title, the WEC Light Heavyweight Championship and the Strikeforce Middleweight Championship. He was named Fighter of the Decade for the 1990s by the Wrestling Observer, Best Full Contact Fighter by Black Belt Magazine, and three-time Fighter of the Year by Full Contact Fighter Magazine. He is a 7th-degree black belt in submission fighting, awarded by O-Sensei Philip S. Porter of the United States Martial Arts Association. He is the adopted brother of UFC Hall of Famer Ken Shamrock. An author, entrepreneur, philanthropist and social activist, he is a color commentator for Showtime Networks and was a brand spokesman for Strikeforce. Background. Early life. From the age of 12, Frank Juarez was placed in various foster homes, group homes, and crisis centers. He also had a few run-ins with law enforcement. Eventually he went to live with Bob Shamrock, who had taken in hundreds of troubled boys. Juarez went to live with Shamrock at his home in Susanville, California, and was officially adopted by Shamrock at the age of 21. Pancrase. In 1994, Ken began to train Frank in submission fighting. Frank accompanied his brother to bouts in the Ultimate Fighting Championship and grew to love the sport. He became a member of Ken's training school, the Lion's Den, and made his mixed martial arts debut in the Pancrase organization in Japan. Shamrock debuted as a fighter in Pancrase on December 16, 1994 in one of the biggest events in mixed martial arts history to date, the King of Pancrase tournament. He was a large underdog against top Pancrase fighter Bas Rutten but went on to defeat Rutten in a close decision victory. Shamrock faced off against expert grappler and eventual tournament finalist Mainabu Yamada later that night, but was defeated via submission at 8:38 of round 1. In 1995, Shamrock fought 9 times, all within the Pancrase organization. He went 6-2-1 over that span, splitting fights with MMA legend and master shoot wrestler Masakatsu Funaki, fighting to a draw with BJJ black belt Alan Goes and losing a close split decision in a rematch with Bas Rutten. After an injury prevented King of Pancrase Bas Rutten from defending his title, an interim championship was created. Shamrock faced Olympic alternate wrestler and master submission grappler Minoru Suzuki on January 28, 1996 for the vacant belt in a match that drew widespread anticipation. In an epic bout, Shamrock submitted Suzuki with a knee-bar at the 22:53 mark of the fight to win the King of Pancrase interim title in front of a sellout crowd in Yokohama. Shamrock scored decision wins over Ryoshi Nagasawa and Osami Shibuya before facing off against Bas Rutten for the third time for the undisputed King of Pancrase title. Rutten won the bout via TKO due to a cut stoppage. Shamrock then avenged his loss to Mainabu Yamada in his next bout, scoring an impressive submission win over the talented grappler. Shamrock found success in Pancrase, but after his adopted brother Ken left the organization following a dispute with management, Shamrock was fired in retaliation. Mixed martial arts. On January 17, 1997, he lost to John Lober in Hawaii's Super Brawl by split decision, having dominated the fight until his lack of cardio became a factor. After his loss to Lober, Shamrock shifted the focus of his career exclusively to mixed martial arts. Shamrock then fought top-ranked Japanese fighter Tsuyoshi Kosaka in rings and defeated Kosaka by decision. Within the Lion's Den, Shamrock trained up-and-coming stars such as Jerry Bollander, Pete Williams, and Guy Mezger. He also developed a close relationship with Morris Smith, who trained him in kickboxing with Javier Mendez. Shamrock then fought Enson Inoue in a bout in Vale-Tudo, Japan 97 that would determine who would fight Kevin Jackson for the newly created UFC Middleweight Championship. After an exciting back-and-forth battle, Shamrock knocked Inoue out with a knee, although the match was officially ruled as a disqualification when due to Enson's brother, Egan, running into the ring after Shamrock had knocked out Anu. Shamrock later stated that this was the toughest fight in his career. UFC Middleweight Champion. After the win over Anu, Shamrock joined the UFC and fought Kevin Jackson for the newly created UFC Middleweight Championship. Jackson had won the middleweight tournament at UFC 14 and was undefeated in MMA at the time, and was also the Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling for the 1992 Summer Olympics. Despite being a heavy underdog, Shamrock armbarred Jackson in just 16 seconds to win the championship. Shamrock then made his first title defense against undefeated Extreme Fighting champion Igor Zinoviev at UFC 16. Zinoviev was a feared Russian kickboxer and sambo specialist who held wins over Mario Sperry and Enson Inu. Shamrock shot a double leg takedown and slammed Zinoviev down so hard that it knocked him unconscious. Zinoviev suffered a broken collarbone and a fractured C5 vertebra from the slam and had to be carried out on a stretcher. Zinoviev's fight with Shamrock forced him to retire permanently from mixed martial arts. Shamrock then defended his belt against Jeremy Horn at UFC 17, submitting him with a knee-bar. In October 1998, Shamrock avenged his earlier loss to John Lober by beating him decisively in 7 minutes at UFC Brazil. In September 1999, Shamrock defended the UFC Middleweight Championship against future UFC Light Heavyweight Champion Tito Ortiz at UFC 22. Ortiz had exploded as a star after his confrontation with Shamrock's brother Ken and his Lions Den camp at UFC 19. The bout was hyped as a grudge, as Shamrock was a former Lions Den member who, according to the marketing, was out for revenge against Ortiz. However, this was not necessarily the case because Shamrock had left the Lions Den on bad terms a year and a half earlier. Despite dominating his opponents in his previous title defenses, Shamrock was considered to be an underdog in this fight. Ortiz had come off convincing wins over Shamrock's former teammates Jerry Bollander and Guy Mezger, and popular opinion was that Ortiz was too big and strong for him to deal with on Shamrock. However, in what is widely considered to be one of the greatest fights in UFC history, Shamrock won after brutal elbows, punches, and hammer blows forced Ortiz to tap out at the end of round 4. Shamrock has stated that Ortiz was his toughest opponent physically due to his weight advantage and style of fighting. With this win, Shamrock solidified himself as perhaps the greatest UFC champion in history to that date, going 5-0 in title fights and finishing each fight decisively. After the win, UFC owner Bob Meirowitz and announcer Jeff Blatnick both praised Shamrock as the greatest competitor in the history of the UFC. Shamrock then relinquished his title and retired from the UFC. After retiring, he briefly acted as a consultant and commentator for the company. In an interview, UFC President Dana White said, "I've talked to Frank Shamrock many times. Frank Shamrock will lead you to believe that we've never talked and we completely have hated each other forever and everything else. He's a weird guy. He's a very, very weird guy. I can't explain it. Frank is a weird guy." Return. After a brief retirement, Shamrock returned to mixed martial arts as a career. He signed a deal to fight Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu standout Elvis Sinosic at K1, the premier kickboxing event in the world. Shamrock beat Sinosic via unanimous decision after 5 3-minute rounds. Later, when Sinosic faced Tito Ortiz for the UFC Light Heavyweight title at UFC 32, Shamrock served as guest commentator. On August 11, 2001, he took on his former student, Shannon Rich, in a kickboxing match for K1. Just 56 seconds into the first round, Shamrock broke Rich's arm with a roundhouse kick and thereby won the match. Shamrock helped to train UFC veteran B.J. Penn for his early bouts with the UFC at the American Kickboxing Academy and produced his own events Bushido and Shoot Box. His first MMA match since 1999 was winning the WEC Light Heavyweight Championship in under 2 minutes from Brian Pardo by submission in March 2003. On March 10, 2006, at Strikeforce, Shamrock vs. Gracie, the first MMA event sanctioned by the state of California, he knocked out Cesar Gracie in 21 seconds. Gracie had never fought an MMA match and was 40 years old, so the fight was considered a serious mismatch. However, Gracie is an elite Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor with years of training under his belt, as well being the mentor of students such as the Diaz brothers, Nate and Nick. On September 14, 2006, it was announced that Shamrock had signed a multi-million-dollar contract with startup MMA organization The World Fighter, and was scheduled to fight in January 2007. However, Shamrock told Showdog that the World Fighter contract no longer applied because it was entirely contingent on the organization getting a television contract with Showtime. The cable network instead agreed to air fights for the Elite XC promotion. On February 10, 2007, Shamrock lost his fight by disqualification to Renzo Gracie during the Elite XC event, which was televised on Showtime. Shamrock delivered 2 knees to Gracie's head while both men were on the ground. After a 5-minute injury timeout, Gracie was unable to continue. Referee Herb Dean disqualified Shamrock due to a foul. Dean had already warned Shamrock once earlier in the fight about striking to the back of the head, an illegal move under the unified rules of mixed martial arts. In December 2005, Shamrock opened his first school, Shamrock Martial Arts Academy in San Jose, California. Shamrock trains his students in kickboxing and submission wrestling. He also manages Team Shamrock, his own fight team. In June 2006, Shamrock was chosen as a coach for the San Jose Razor Claws of the International Fight League. Debuting against Carlos Newton's Toronto Dragons on September 23, 2006 at the Mark in Moline, Illinois, the Dragons won 3-2. The Razor Claws subsequently lost 2-3 against the Ken Shamrock-coached Nevada Lions on January 19, 2007. Strikeforce Shamrock and Phil Baroni had engaged in a war of words with YouTube videos following Shamrock's fight with Renzo Gracie. The two faced off at Strikeforce, Shamrock vs Baroni, a co-promotion between Elite XC and Strikeforce on June 22, 2007, on pay-per-view. Shamrock went on to outstrike Baroni in the first part of this fight in the stand-up. Shamrock was docked a point for using strikes to the back of the head while he had Baroni's back. In the second round, Shamrock took some strikes from Baroni, but he was able to regain control and drop Baroni, transition to his back and end the fight with a rear naked choke. Baroni refused to tap out and was choked unconscious. As soon as he regained his senses, he walked over to Shamrock, congratulated him and left the cage. By winning the match, Shamrock became the Strikeforce Middleweight Champion, thereby making him the first person to win a title in all 3 major North American fight promotions, the UFC, WEC and Strikeforce. On January 11, 2008, it was announced that Shamrock would face Kung La in a match on March 29, 2008 for the Strikeforce Middleweight Championship during the joint Strikeforce Elite XC event at the HP Pavilion in San Jose, California. La arguably controlled the fight, at times outstriking the more MMA-experienced Shamrock. At one point in the later stages of round 3, Shamrock appeared to have La hurt but was unable to finish him with a barrage of punches against the cage. La recovered and responded in the closing seconds of the round with more kicks and a spinning back fist. Shamrock was unable to answer the bell to begin round 4 due to a broken arm caused by one of La's kicks, and the fight was ruled a TKO as a result of corner stoppage. Shamrock indicated post-fight that these kicks had broken his right arm. Frank publicly stated that he would like to face Ken Shamrock in the first quarter of 2009, until stating in an interview, "There's no point in fighting Ken, he's finished, why beat on an old man?" causing the likelihood of this fight to now be very slim. Afterwards, he said that he would like to fight Tito Ortiz and then Kung La and then do some boxing stuff. On April 11, 2009, Shamrock was defeated by Nick Diaz by technical knockout. Retirement Shamrock announced his retirement from fighting on June 26, 2010 at Strikeforce, Fedor vs Werdum. Bellator MMA On February 5, 2013, Shamrock signed with Bellator to coach on the promotion's reality series titled Fight Master, Bellator MMA. Personal life: Shamrock and his wife, Amy, reside in San Jose. The couple had a daughter named Nicolette on April 24, 2008. Shamrock also has a son, Frankie, from a previous marriage. Shamrock runs a franchise of schools, a merchandising company, Frank Shamrock, Incorporated, MMA Entertainment, and mixed martial arts for law enforcement. Shamrock also wrote the Wiley book Mixed Martial Arts for Dummies. In 1998, Shamrock had a falling out with his brother Ken and his father Bob. They would not communicate again until Bob became terminally ill years later. In separate interviews aired January 18, 2007 by Showdog.com's Beard Down radio show, both Frank and Ken said they remain estranged. Frank claimed Ken has spurned all attempts at reconciliation. Ken accused Frank of treating their adoptive father badly. As seen on Frank's documentary, Bound by Blood, he and Ken have reconciled. In an interview with Sam Kaplan of Sportsline.com, Shamrock revealed he felt concerned with Ken's training methods, and when he confronted Ken, he was told, "You don't have what it takes, you're not going to be a world champion, and I want you to run my gyms for the rest of your life." This spurred him on to leave, which led to the estrangement of both Ken and Bob. He also stated that he would be happy to fight against Ken, should the opportunity arise. Ken felt the same way, stating on Showdog Radio Network that Shamrock vs. Shamrock is a distinct possibility, stating that he taught Frank everything he knows and that it is wrong to proclaim yourself the legend, a moniker Frank has been using since his return at WEC 6. On January 14, 2010, Frank and Ken Shamrock's adoptive father Bob Shamrock died due to health complications from diabetes. Shamrock is a commentator and fighter on the EA Sports MMA video game, which was released in 2010. On November 18, 2010, Shamrock appeared as a guest on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. Shamrock is featured in the award-winning documentary on the sport of mixed martial arts titled Fight Life, released in 2013. The film is directed by James Z. Feng and produced by Rel Films. After his retirement, Shamrock landed a guest role on Walker, Texas Ranger, and the main role in a Burger King commercial. He was also featured as Damien in the 2005 movie No Rules and was uncredited in an episode of Oz. In October 2012, Shamrock released his autobiography Uncaged, My Life as a Champion MMA Fighter. Championships and Accomplishments, Pancrase Hybrid Wrestling, Interim King of Pancrase. Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC Light Heavyweight Championship, 4 successful title defenses, headlined first UFC event in Brazil, fastest submission in the history of the UFC Light Heavyweight division, undefeated in the UFC. Strikeforce, first MMA fighter to win championships in UFC, WEC and Strikeforce, Strikeforce Middleweight Championship, fastest knockout in Strikeforce history. World Extreme Cardioiting, WEC Light Heavyweight Championship. Showdog, Mixed Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Black Belt Magazine, 1998 Full Contact Fighter of the Year. Wrestling Observer Newsletter, 1998 Most Outstanding Fighter, 1999 Most Outstanding Fighter, 1999 Fight of the Year vs. Tito Ortiz on September 24, 1999, 1990s Fighter of the Decade. Inside MMA, 2008 Fight of the Year Bazzi Award vs. Kung Lao on March 29. MMAFreak.com, Hall of Fame, Class of 2014. Mixed Martial Arts Record. Kickboxing Record. Submission Grappling Record. Footnotes. External links, Official website, Frank Shamrock Martial Arts Academy, Professional MMA Record for Frank Shamrock from Showdog, Frank Shamrock on Twitter, Frank Shamrock on Facebook, Frank Shamrock at the Internet Movie Database, 5 Ounces of Pain, Interview with Frank Shamrock, Frank's interview with John Klein of Elevation Radio.